Vice President Harris yesterday did sit for that first TV interview as the Democratic nominee for president. Harris and her running mate, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, spoke with CNN while campaigning in Georgia. The vice president was asked about day one of her presidency and was pressed on criticism that she has shifted away from some of her more liberal policy positions.
Day one, it's going to be about, one, implementing my plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families. For example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one. I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. You mentioned the Green New Deal. I have always believed, and I have worked on it, that the climate crisis is real, that it is an urgent matter to which we should apply metrics that include holding ourselves to deadlines around time. We did that with the Inflation Reduction Act. We have set goals for the United States of America and, by extension, the globe around when we should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, as an example. That value has not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed. One, I am so proud to have served as vice president to Joe Biden. And 2, I am so proud to be running with Tim Walz for president of the United States and to bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
But the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss in this election.
So, Eddie Glaude, one of the big questions going into this first interview was how she would answer some specific questions about clear policy differences, her positions from the 2020 campaign when she was campaigning in 2019 and where she stands now as the nominee. And we're going to get to some of those specifics in just a moment. Her overarching response to that was, my values haven't changed. I've come to understand some of these issues a little bit differently, and therefore I've landed in a different place on issues like fracking. But I'm just curious, given that this was her first sit-down interview as the Democratic nominee, your impressions?
Well, it's great to see you, Willie. I think she did well. She didn't do any harm. That's important. But I also thought the answer about the shift in the positions between 2019 and today was really, really spot on. You know, we could have values that constitute the through line of our positions, but the context changed, the situation changed, our experiences change. And by virtue of that, we make decisions. You know, it's early in the morning to be quoting Ralph Waldo Emerson, but, you know, he says a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, a foolish consistency. And that has everything to do with judging your commitments over and against the changing circumstances. So I thought she answered that question really, really powerfully. And there were some other powerful moments, too. So the final judgment for me, she did no harm. She set the stage for the next time she sits down.
Eddie, we'll take Emerson or James Baldwin from you at any hour of any day. So you get a pass on that always. Jeremy Peters, this obviously was a big moment for the vice president. Her nominee to be vice president at her side, Tim Walz, was there as well. But this really was an interview about the candidate, about who she is, because there are open and fair questions about why she has changed so dramatically on so many key issues. What is the sense inside the campaign about how that interview went yesterday?
I think, Willie, the most telling phrase and probably the most important to Kamala Harris's appeal to the kind of voters she'll need to win was that phrase that she used about where most Americans are. I think overall what we heard from her last night really was a repudiation of the politics that dominated the Democratic Party in 2020, when she was, of course, running in the Democratic primary and had to stake out some positions that were not popular with most Americans. I mean, you know, she said that she was, she reversed herself on the decriminalization of border crossings. She said that, she would support fracking. She said that she would appoint a Republican, or that she would consider appointing a Republican to her cabinet. I mean, this is about as far from the Kamala Harris of 2019, 2020 as I could have imagined. And it's much more in step with where the kinds of voters are that she will need to win over in Michigan, Pennsylvania, suburban Atlanta, suburban Phoenix, because the policies that a lot of Democrats were trying to embrace because they thought that's where the party was in 2020 were really out of step with the concerns of most Americans. And that became evident when the Democratic Party rejected candidates like Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren in 2020, and went with the centrist Joe Biden. So I think she's really positioned herself in a way that should scare Republicans. I know that Republicans were scrambling yesterday to try to figure out how to push back on this interview. They once again have kind of failed to land a punch on Harris. And what you see, I think, is the kind of soaring rhetoric from her about uniting the country that a lot of people are really hungry for.
And the criticism you hear from the Trump campaign and Republicans that they hope will take hold with independent voters is that Vice President Harris doesn't quite know who she is. She was someone in 2019 and in the Senate that she's saying she's not now, but she answered specific questions to get into it a little bit more closely here. Vice President Harris pressed on those evolving policy positions, including on the question of fracking.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
In 2019, I believe, at a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed. I believe it is very important that we take seriously what we must do to guard against what is a clear crisis in terms of the climate. And to do that, we can do what we have accomplished thus far. The Inflation Reduction Act, what we have done to invest, by my calculation, over probably $1 trillion over the next 10 years, investing in a clean energy economy. What we've already done, creating over 300,000 new clean energy jobs. That tells me, from my experience as vice president, we can do it without banning fracking. In fact, Dana, I cast the tie-breaking vote that actually increased leases for fracking as vice president. So I'm very clear about where I stand.
And was there some policy or scientific data that you saw that you said, oh, okay, I get it now?
What I have seen is that we can grow and we can increase a thriving clean energy economy without banning fracking. Okay.
So Sam Stein, pretty clear there. She says, in 2019, I said I wanted to ban fracking. In 2020, when I became the vice presidential nominee, I came on board with the position that we were not going to ban fracking, and I hold that position today. The subtext, because Dana Bash did a good job asking specific questions then about immigration, how she's changed on a series of policies, the subtext is, forget everything I said in 2019 when I was running in a Democratic primary. The person you should look at is the one sitting before you today and the one who was on the stage with Joe Biden in 2020.
Right. I mean, yes, that is the subtext. I've always wondered in these situations, could someone go full Bulworth, not Bulwark, Bulworth, and just be like, look, I was running in the Democratic primary, I needed to get some progressive votes, and now I'm not. You know, like, would that work?
Yeah.
Probably not. But that is probably the truth, or close to it. I mean, there is some validity to the idea that the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, did spend, you know, historic amounts of money to prop up the clean energy economy. Obviously, that's helped pursue that economy and grow it in a way that allows for fracking. But, you know, if we're being frank about it, fracking is a huge industry, or a relatively huge industry in a critical swing state of Pennsylvania, and you don't want to offend that industry. There's no good answers really to give to that question. I thought she, you know, did what she had to do, which is assert her position, explain as best she can, and move on. And this is, again, I'm a broken record here, but, you know, this is why you probably should do more interviews, is that you get these things out of the way so that you can move on to more favorable terrain. And I imagine this will come up again during the debate, and I'm sure she'll have the same exact answer.